Are you listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any other platform where you can leave a rate or review? Do you like what we're doing? If the answer to all of that is yes, please consider quickly giving us a 5-star rate. And if you wouldn't mind leaving us a nice review, we greatly appreciate that as well. Okay, let's do this.
Hello, welcome to the Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 282 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we're discussing chapter 10 of A Dance with Dragons, that's Jon 3.
And as you probably know by now, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you. Unless, of course, you have a Buy Me a Coffee Sustainer tier that includes spoilers, then we are going to spoil things for you. But regardless, hopefully we'll provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll provide some additional information about the geography and characters in this chapter. How are you, Mackelly?
I'm doing all right. I'm surviving the blanket of yellow pollen.
It's crazy. It's crazy how much pollen we get here. Like, I think I've told you before, probably a year ago, I told you that in the UK, pollen is like oxygen. We believe in its existence because we see its effect, but you can't see it.
You can't see it, right?
Here it's like a tangible thing. It's everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I grew up here in the States in Western Pennsylvania, and I don't ever recall pollen being visible at the level that it is here.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
We were driving to visit Molly at school on Saturday, and you could see the pollen dumping out of the pine trees as we drove up the major highway.
But they say that that's not the biggest allergen. There's some simultaneous allergen, which is what makes us all sneeze. The yellow stuff is not actually the one that gets us all, but man,
I've heard that too. It is. We need more rain. That's the issue.
Yeah. So I thought I would tell a story, which we'll call the second in an occasional series entitled Everybody Poops. So, as you're acutely aware, Mackelly, gentlemen of our age are invited to occasionally go get a colonoscopy.
That we are. Yeah, we sure are.
Since last we spoke, this has befallen me. And
I knew that it did, yes.
I had a pretty torrid time of it. So the way this works, younger listeners, is the night before your colonoscopy, you take a dose of a thing which has a dramatic effect on your digestion.
That's one way to put it.
Mm-hmm. And then you have to wake up like 5 hours before your colonoscopy and take a second dose of the same thing. And the thing is, most of the damage is done by the first dose. You know, the majority of stuff is done by the first dose.
Right.
But the second dose has that feeling of dread that the first dose doesn't quite have, because with the second dose, you know what's coming.
Yeah.
It's been a few years. You maybe forget how bad the first dose is going to be, but that second dose, you know what's coming. After 45 minutes after taking the second dose, I threw up.
Oh, no.
I know, right? I was like, oh, my God. And
what do I do now?
Exactly. I mean, from the taste in my mouth, I knew I was throwing up that thing that I'd just ingested. So I was like, oh, no. And, of course, it's too early to call them because they're not even at work at that time. You've got up early to do this to yourself.
Right.
Like, oh,
yeah,
great.
yeah.
So I was in a bit of a panic because I was like, I cannot go through this again. I can't cancel and go through this again.
Yeah.
So when they finally got on the phone with me, I said, look, so the tricky part was I sensed that the stuff was in me, but you have to hydrate as well. I sensed that some of it was in me because it had been in me for 45 minutes, you know.
Right, yeah.
But I couldn't face drinking water after the throwing up, so I was really dehydrated. So I was like, it took me like another hour before I could really start drinking water again. So finally called them, and they said, they were kind of nice. They were saying, you know, it happens. Don't worry, just come. They said, it'll be fine. If it's still a problem, we'll just give you an enema. It's like, oh.
This is going from bad to worse.
It's like, that reassuring tone belied what you were about to tell me.
Oh, no.
But I got it done, so I'm off the hook now for 5 more years. So.
All right. Good Good work.
Uh,
Good work. Were you able to eat right afterward?
yeah, I mean, you know me. I can eat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had 3 and I've always been able to eat right afterward, but Stacy's had 1 and she was down and out for the rest of the day.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, I was tired, but I certainly did some eating before I fell asleep.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, kids, look after your health and, I mean, grow old, but it sucks.
Yeah, lay off the hot dogs and cured meats as much as possible in your youth, and maybe you'll have, less to concern about when you reach our age.
My other story for the day is prompted by what you noticed when I got on the call with you, that I'm wearing a smarter shirt than usual.
Yes, very fancy looking.
That's partly because I had a presentation this morning with my boss's boss.
Oh, okay.
I was giving a presentation.
Speak of, I think.
Sorry?
I think I know who you're
referring to. Yes, you do know who I speak of. So
yes.
I was kind of nervous, and I really practiced, and I went up, and when it came to start time, she wasn't quite there, but she'd pinged the person running the meeting. The person running the meeting said she's a few minutes late, but she'll be here. So Simon, why don't you start anyway? I was like, okay, fine. So I gave the presentation. It went pretty well. I was pretty happy with it, but I wasn't paying attention to the listeners. I was just focusing on the slides kind of thing. And when I finally finished the presentation, I said, thanks for listening. I closed the presentation and went back to the things. And at that moment, my boss's boss joined the call.
Oh, no. She missed the whole thing.
She perfectly missed my presentation.
Oh,
I was like, dang it. I was so nervous.
Did she say, okay, let's get started?
Yeah. Why don't you recap everything you just said, Simon?
Slide 1. Oh, well.
All right, well, let's get down to business. How did we leave Jon Snow? Last time we saw Jon, he was sending Gilly, Sam, and Aemon from the wall and adjusting Janos Slynt's height for disobeying orders. Aemon had told Jon that he had to kill the boy within him to become the man he needed to be. And pretty much by the end of the chapter, the job was done.
Yeah.
Mackelly, why don't we give the summary of this one?
All right. Well, Jon watches as Mance Rayder is dragged to his pyre. A rope is looped around his neck and around the pommel of Sir Godry Faring's horse. The king beyond the wall's courage fails him when he sees the cage suspended over a pit of kindling, and he's dragged the rest of the way. 1,000 wildlings are confined to a stockade nearby, giving them a view of what's to come. Jon had pleaded with Stannis to pardon Mance. His skills and his influence with the wildlings could be really useful in the war to come. However, to no one's surprise, Stannis did not relent.
Melisandre is the mistress of ceremonies and proclaims that all must choose between light and darkness. She has brought forth the Horn of Joramun. Mance had found it in Joramun's grave. If blown, it would have ended the wall and then begun the long night that would never end. But the Lord of Light had sent his champion, Azor Ahai reborn. Jon thinks that where Melisandre is fire, Stannis is stone. He's dressed in finery, along with Val, who wears a bronze circlet. Everyone knows that Melisandre is the real queen, not the homely Selyse at Eastwatch by the Sea.
Jon is sad for Selyse and Shireen. The wall lacks the creature comforts that both must be used to. At a word from Melisandre, the horn bursts into flames, and subsequently is tossed into the fire pit. With that, all is aflame, and Mance in the cage sobs and begs as the flames begin to lick him. Val is stoic, as Jon has come to expect from the women of the free folk. Jon's seen enough, and with a one-word command, 4 arrows finish off Mance, earning a scowl from Stannis.
Jon considers Sam, Gilly, Aemon, and the baby. He's heard reports of bad storms from Eastwatch, and wonders if his attempts to save the group led to their watery deaths. Melisandre lectures the free folk about their false king, and Stannis reveals Lightbringer. Jon has seen the flaming sword before, but this is different. Its brightness dims even the flames in the pit, causing men to shield their eyes.
Stannis tells the free folk that he's their one true king. If they bend the knee, he will take care of them with food, land, and justice. If they won't bend the knee, they can die here on the north side of the wall. The king commands the gate of the pens holding the free folk to be opened. A trickle of people make their way to the king, then more follow, until it's a solid stream of humanity. But before bending their knee, Each man, woman, and child is given a weirwood branch to toss into the flames, symbolizing them discarding the old gods for R'hllor.
Jon counsels Stannis that the free folk hate kneelers. They would respect Stannis more if he did not make them bend the knee to him. Stannis wants their swords, not their love. As each person kneels, they then follow the line through the wall to food, shelter, and fresh clothing at Castle Black. Jon cannot help but wonder what side these new royal subjects will take when Tormund Giantsbane inevitably attacks the wall with the remnants of Mance's army.
We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes. Lord Steward Bowen Marsh approaches Jon. This is a day he never imagined he'd live to see. Good men and brothers died to stop this wildling horde from getting south of the wall, and here they are getting a free pass. Alliser Thorne chips in that the Night's Watch will be cursed by all the realm for this. Jon really doesn't care what Thorne thinks. Thorne has been more wary since Jaina Slint lost his head, but Jon knows there's still malice in him.
To the remaining free folk and the giants, Stannis tells them that they are free to go if they wish. Spread the word of what they have seen here. They are welcomed in his realm, but he will suffer no more attacks on his wall. Bowen Marsh understands a common cause with the wildlings is necessary in light of their common enemy. However, that does not mean tens of thousands of savages need to be let through the wall. Let them fight the others from their own lands. Meanwhile, the Night's Watch should fill in the 3 gates left through the wall. They can easily defend the wall from its top.
Jon says if we filled in the gates, we'd be blind to the activities north of the wall. Marsh counters that Lord Commander Mormont's last great ranging cost the Night's Watch a quarter of its men. But Jon argues that it really doesn't matter. Stannis will never allow them to close the gates. At that, Marsh points out that there's rumors that Jon is too close with King Stannis, and that he's, and Jon finishes Marsh's sentence, a rebel, turncloak, bastard, and warg. It seems Slint's accusations have lingered.
Well, at least in Jon's mind. Maybe everyone else has forgotten them.
Right. He was going to say something. Marsh was going to say something entirely different.
What would the men have me do, Jon wonders? Take up arms against the king? He outnumbered the Night's Watch 3-1. Besides, he rode to our rescue and is a guest in Castle Black. Marsh worries that Stannis' cause is doomed and that the Lannisters will mark the Night's Watch as traitors for aiding Stannis. Jon is not so sure. With Tywin dead, the Boy King rules, and the Iron Throne is not a toy. With that, he leaves Marsh to his duties. Jon will think on his counsel.
Jon rides through the wall with Dolorous Ed. Jon wants the companionship of his brothers, so he heads for the makeshift dining hall. He and Ed find their friends mocking Melisandre's prayers, and Jon puts a stop to it. Gren makes room for Jon on the bench, yet, despite wanting nothing more, Jon thinks better of it and takes a rain check. The days of dining with his friends are gone. Outside, he spies Val in her confinement at the top of the king's tower. She's as beautiful as any woman in the world, and she could have been his, along with Winterfell and his father's name. But he chose the Night's Watch instead.
He finds himself at the door to Cleidas's room beneath the rookery. The pair share mulled wine and discuss the passage that Maester Aemon marked for Jon's contemplation. It told of Lightbringer making its own heat, yet oddly Stannis' sword, as bright as it is, gives off no heat. Jon leaves and makes his way back to his chambers. He wearily responds to letters from the Shadow Tower and Eastwatch, both asking for more men. He will send Haldor and Toad to the Shadow Tower and Gren and Pip to Eastwatch. When he finally rests, he looks at his companions in his room, Mormont's Raven and Ghost, his only 2 companions left to him. This is his lot, he thinks, until the end of his days.
Wah, wah.
Yeah. I kind of think of this chapter as, we talked about last chapter, he really sort of fulfilled the mission of killing the boy so the man could be born, kind of thing.
Right.
This is kind of like the Zombieland double tap, where he
Yes, it is.
really finishes off that boy.
Yeah, he seems really weary. The weight of the command seems to be weighing heavily on him right about now, and it's a tough time to cut your teeth as a Lord Commander. It's been a long time since there's been a tougher time. Yeah,
you've just watched a man you came to respect and like burn to death as well, just, on top of everything else,
Yes, true.
I mean, beheading Janos Slynt, that's one thing. I mean, that's tough to carry around with you for sure, even though Janos Slynt really deserved it. But Mance sort of deserved it in some ways because he had made a vow that he broke and knew what the punishment was for breaking that vow. But he did have a lot to offer, and it's a strange decision, actually. It's strange how the book and the TV show sort of like differ on this. I'll mention it when we get to the TV show, but they have a slightly different view of this killing of Mance. Anyway, important first question, Mackelly, and this goes to the very essence of this chapter, is did we know he had the Horn of Joramun, or is this news?
So we saw the horn in Mance's tent during the parley between Jon and Mance beneath the wall. When Stannis' army interrupted Jon, Jon was there supposedly parleying, but his mission was to actually assassinate Mance. The offer that Mance was prepared to make was, I'll give you the Horn of Winter, or I won't blow the Horn of Winter. Both. I won't blow it, and I'll give it to you, if you let the free folk pass the wall. Obviously, it never came to that.
Yeah.
But, Mance feared, he didn't want to do it because he feared that destroying the wall would obviously leave no defense against the others.
It's definitely a last resort for the free folk, because they want to get south of the wall because of the wall, not just because they'd like to live 2 miles further south than they currently do.
Yes, it kind of defeats the purpose of getting past the wall if you destroy the wall in the process.
I guess there's nothing between you and dawn at this point, and you maybe think
right. Yeah. Make your way all the way to the Summer Isles or something.
Exactly.
But we don't know.
So this wasn't completely news to us. And also it gives legitimacy to, because all the way through this chapter, because I didn't remember that, Shark, I wasn't sure if Melisandre and Stannis were faking it to sort of like make it more dramatic, the whole thing. But that they weren't. Right. They were burning the horn that at least Mance was saying was the Horn of Winter.
Yes, we don't know if Mance was faking it.
Right.
We haven't. There is nothing on it that says "made by Joramun." There's some runes that maybe spell out "made by Joramun," but nobody's reading them, I guess. It'd
be funny if the runes were in a language that nobody spoke anymore, but they said on them quite clearly in that language, "Do not burn, will sound."
Right. All of a sudden, they hear some cracks coming from above. Oh no! Run away!
Damn, we're on the wrong side of the wall too. And by the way, that's the other thing that confused me this chapter. For the whole first 2 reads of this, I was like, "What? Where are they?" I just assumed they were in Castle Black, but they were north of the wall. They were on the other side of the wall, and it kept tripping me up. I was like, because they let the free folk through the gate of the fenced area that they were in, not the gate through the wall. And then once they came out of that gate, they then let them. So I kept going, where is this happening?
Yeah, I see where your confusion is, because they make a big deal about opening the gates.
The gate, exactly.
Yeah, but the gate that they're referring to is the one that's holding the pen that all the wildlings are in.
Exactly.
Yeah, I see where you would have gotten confused.
I got there eventually, but I was like, huh?
Well, for anybody else who's confused, now you know.
Yeah,
they were
definitely.
This
north
all
of the
took
wall.
place north of the wall before Jon rode through to find his friends for dinner.
Yeah.
But I started to say a minute ago, there was another horn found north of the wall. Remember, Jon found that horn. It's an old broken war horn that he found with the cache of dragonglass on the Fist of the First Men, and Sam's been carrying it around with him. He's taken it all the way to the Citadel. So, there's more than one horn that's been north of the wall anyway.
You fancy the Here's the thing. If this horn can do what we believe it can do, you wouldn't want it to just look like any old horn.
Right. I agree. You accidentally pick up the wrong horn and oh no, that's a problem.
Yeah. So I'm willing to go with this one being the horn. The interesting question that sort of Jon poses to himself is, did the free folk know that Mance had found it? Because Ygritte told him that they hadn't.
Right.
And so the question that Jon asked himself was she lying to me, or had Mance kept it a secret that they'd found it?
Yeah, and we don't know. Ygritte seemed pretty sincere. She was crying at the top of the wall, and she, that was the chapter when they scaled the wall. And at the top, she was crying, and he thought it was because it was such an exhausting journey. And she said, no, it's because we never found the horn to bring this wall down. So it's not like she offered that information to him in a way to try and trick him.
Yeah.
I think she at least didn't seem to know that the horn was found. And when the horn was being burned, the description is that many in the pens, the wildlings, the free folk in the pens, audibly sighed or, were dismayed by the burning of the horn. So it seems like they knew what that horn was, or else they didn't, and Melisandre just announced what it was.
Well, that's the thing. Melisandre had announced what it was because that was sort of my question. If Mance had kept it secret from everyone, and he may have only kept it secret from Ygritte and the rest of the raiding party, but if he kept it secret from everyone, then the people in the pen would have been like, what are they doing? Because they probably wouldn't even know the story of the Horn of Winter. They'd be like, what are they? Why are they burning that big tusk? What is all this? Anyone who couldn't hear Melisandre, it's like a Monty Python sketch. Blessed are the cheesemakers.
Maybe, I think probably everyone at least knew that it existed because they were up in the Frostfangs theoretically looking for it.
Yeah.
But he might not have told all but a select few that they had found the horn.
Yeah. So Stannis refuses to pardon Mance, and basically for being an oathbreaker. That's almost everything else. I mean, Stannis is clearly forgiving the rest of the free folk for the same other crimes, but he can't forgive Mance for breaking his oath. And one more time, Stannis sticks to his guns, except when it suits him.
Stannis is gonna Stannis,
Yeah, for sure. But it's disappointing from a strategic point of view. I mean, that's the thing. I think to be a good king, he's got to get some strategic thought, which has to trump his inflexible moral fiber occasionally.
Right.
We've said this many times, but this is just another example where it's letting him down, I think.
Yeah, I can see both sides of the argument. I mean, obviously, Mance is definitely valuable, and his support of Stannis would go a long way with the wildlings. And his knowledge of the north of the wall would be invaluable, but unlike the other wildlings, even Rattleshirt, he was a deserter of the Night's Watch, and letting him off the hook would set a bad precedent, especially at these trying times. So I guess, I think probably Robert, his brother, Robert Baratheon, might have let Stannis live. But I mean, not Stannis, let Mance live. I don't know that Ned would have.
No,
that's what I was.
Yeah,
I was doing the angel and the devil on each side, on each ear, and I think those two would have gone the opposite ways on that.
Here's my suggestion: issue him with a black bandana, and say that you wear, it marks you for death. But in the meantime, I want you to do some things for me before I carry out my sentence against you.
Yes, I mean, there had to have been ways around it. And Melisandre told Jon last chapter, I think maybe it was 2 chapters ago, when he made his plea to Stannis for Mance, she said, I'll think on what you've said about Mance. And I guess she decided that King's blood is worth more than Mance's usefulness alive.
So now you've brought up a point which I find interesting. So Lightbringer burns brighter than ever during this chapter. And so you're associating that, and Jon was to a certain extent as well, with Mance's execution.
Yes. I think it's possible.
Right. Do you think that that is what they were hoping to achieve with Mance's blood? Let's see if we can't get a few more watts out of this thing. Or
maybe. That was all they wanted. Look how bright and shiny. because for me, the killing Mance with the arrows, which the Night's Watch did at Jon's command, feels like it would foil some of that. Now, the blood from the arrows would have dripped into the fire and burned like the... Right, yeah. I see what you're saying. He didn't die of the flames.
He did not.
He was killed by arrows while he was burning from the flames. So I guess it depends on how... Yeah, his entire being is going to be consumed by those flames regardless. It's just whether he's alive or dead when it happens.
But then the other side of this is Stannis just putting this guy to death for the oath breaking, and he doesn't actually care that he's got King's blood. He's not trying to do any blood magic here. He's just putting this guy to death for breaking his oath. When they burned the 3 leeches, they had a specific target in mind for those 3 leeches. They were invoking blood magic, and they said what they were doing. Here, they just burned him. And they didn't say what they were doing. And the only noticeable effect was Lightbringer got brighter.
That is very true. They did have a very specific purpose when they burned the leeches of Edric Storm's blood.
Right.
And here they just... If there is, we just don't know. Maybe Jon's not privy to that information or something.
Yes, Jon probably wouldn't be privy to it. See, that's a good point. So maybe there was something that they were asking for.
We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or 2 if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghostsharrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes. Yeah. Maybe we'll find out eventually, but you're right. There was no stated purpose. And they did, when Jon was talking to Melisandre and Stannis, and separately, last chapter, he knew about, remember, he overheard the Queensmen talking about 2 kings, the father and the son. Father dies first and then the son, so that they're both kings when they die. So it does seem like there's been some thought about, we want him to die as a king.
Right. But by implication, the second half of that is Gilly's baby.
Right. Yes.
Or rather, Dallas baby, but they don't know that they don't have Dallas baby anymore.
Yeah. But I guess my point is just they did have a proactive thought that we want to use this man's king's blood, but for what, we have not been told. Right.
I see what you're saying. They have certainly not abandoned all their ambitions around blood magic, and this was so we're confident that behind the scenes they were invoking something during this.
You sure would hope. I mean, they killed 3 kings with 3 leeches. Imagine what you could do with an entire body's worth of a king's blood.
Yeah, the only thing is that the guy said, "I'm the king beyond the wall." And the free folk went, "No, we need someone to follow."
Okay, sure. Why not you? But speaking of Mance and his execution, it was kind of surprising that Mance went out the way he did, kicking and screaming and denying that he was the king beyond the wall and denying his own name. And I just thought, as I was reading it, you just never know how someone's going to react when put in a situation such as that, like their imminent demise. And the way it transpired was a little bit odd, too, because it began with a smile. He was smiling when he was let in.
I found that strange as well. Not like Tyrion doing acrobatics strange, but strange.
Yeah, he already had the noose around his neck and was being dragged in. And then he saw the pyre and it turned to panic.
Yeah.
And I wondered, was he told that something else was going to happen? Was
Maybe.
he thinking he was going to be hanged and he was more accepting of that than being burned alive?
Yeah.
Something. So it was. I don't know why that description was there, that he was smiling first.
Yeah, maybe it is just that. Maybe it's just you go from, I'm going to put a brave face on this, to seeing what's going to happen, and then all bravery disappears.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's very possible. That could be. But speaking of Lightbringer, so later in this chapter, Jon is discussing with Clytus about the passage from the Jade Compendium. Remember in the Sam and Jon mirror chapters from A Feast for Crows and earlier in this book, Aemon told Jon that he marked these chapters in the Jade Compendium for Jon and then said, "Knowledge is a weapon. Arm yourself well before you go into battle." And the chapter, we finally now know what it said. It said that Lightbringer is warm to the touch because it was tempered by Azor Ahai's wife, Nissa, when he drove it through her heart. And that Stannis' Lightbringer is cold to the touch. So it seems like Aemon was trying to say, hey, Jon, I want you to know that Stannis' Lightbringer might not be all that it's cracked up to be. And he made the comment when he first saw it that it was odd that it gave off no heat.
Yeah.
But then while he was dying on the Cinnamon Wind, I think it was the next to last Sam chapter. It was the next to last Sam chapter in Feast. He told Sam that Melisandre was deceiving herself and that the sword is wrong and that it's light without heat and nothing more than an empty glamour. So, and then he added, false light will only lead us deeper into darkness and that Dany is the true answer. But based on what he's saying, he was dying and he was, kind of in and out of common sense, I guess. He's saying it was nothing but an empty glamour. And we've always wondered, how did Stannis go from oven mitts and a crumbling, burning sword to this, full-fledged looking Lightbringer? And we've never gotten an explanation for it.
Yeah. But it responds to the blood magic, it seems, which is, that's something,
Yeah, unless it's Melisandre's glamour.
Yeah.
Does her glamour get strengthened?
Yeah.
There is a ruby in the pommel of the sword, and she wears that ruby that's always glowing around her neck. And there's discussion about whether that is related somehow, that, she controls the glamour of the sword through that.
Right.
But all that led me to wonder, does Stannis know this? Does Stannis know that if Aemon is right and Lightbringer is a fraud, does Stannis know he's selling a false bill of goods here? It just doesn't seem very Stannis-like to do something like that.
Tricky, isn't it? Because
the
thing about Stannis is he definitely wants the throne and he definitely believes he should be on the throne. And he knows that whilst he certainly believes he has the best claim and arguably does have the best claim, he doesn't have the best position. Not
right.
By a long shot does he have the best
Not
position.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So making allies and making a myth around yourself can help.
Right.
And stretching those truths to suit you. Yeah, it doesn't sound totally Stannis, but at the same time, that ambition burns strong in him,
Yeah. You got to do what you got to do.
Right. But if you got to do what you got to do, then maybe keep Mance Rayder alive for a little while.
Well, that's true. Yeah. I see.
But that's the thing.
The comparison.
Stannis's rigidity is as fake as that sword, because it bends when he needs it to. Doesn't bend very often, but it bends when he needs it to.
He pardoned a lot of lords that supported his brother over him,
for sure,
to get what he needed.
Yeah. Melisandre has all the free folk burn weirwood branches before bending the knee. Yeah, it's both sad and depressing, and it's not good for the future,
No, yeah. Jon thinks while it's happening, he thinks, these people have no choice. Here's your options.
Yeah.
Don't starve and freeze to death and come with us, or starve and freeze to death and don't bend the knee and give up your old gods,
Or burn this piece of wood, which symbolizes something that you aren't going to believe.
Right.
It's not going to make you believe that.
Yeah, coercion is not a great way to forge long-lasting peace and loyal subjects.
No, indeed.
And they killed the one man who, started brandishing his branch as a weapon. So, that caused less converts, although Jon's description is that most continued. Yeah. 1 in 10 didn't. But you're basically getting down to Maslow's pyramid of needs, and safety and security is only one level above food and water at the very base of the pyramid,
Right.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah. So what's life going to be like for the wildlings south of the wall? I mean, they're going to want any able-bodied person to hold the wall with them, presumably. But then they also need more farmers, because now they've got more mouths to feed. Now, I will say, I think the free folk are extremely industrious and self-sufficient. So they'll be able to take care of themselves given the amount of land available to them. But can they up production to the point where they can sustain the now swollen Night's Watch, swollen with both Stannis' army and with the additional free folk? Maybe. It's going to be hard graft, though. I'll tell you that for free.
Yeah, I was thinking about if I were one of those free folk, and I've spent so much effort, sweat, blood, and tears and fear trying to get to the south side of this huge wall that I've only ever seen the northern side of. And my first impression is Castle Black, and I'd be, on one hand, you've probably never seen a structure that big, so you might be a bit impressed. But Castle Black right now is broken, burned, has no exterior walls aside from the wall, and you'd be like, this is
kind of like Craster's, only bigger.
Right. They've never seen a castle before, but still. And then they're given clothing. They're given, I think they're cloaks and breeches and all the things. But I wondered, does the Night's Watch have anything that's not all black? Are they gonna all be walking around looking just like Night's Watch, and it gets very confusing?
I believe they may have gone to Simon and Mackelly's haberdashery in Malta.
They better have. We were working overtime to get those brown cloaks ready. So yeah, like you were saying, they are very industrious, and I think they probably can make good use of the gift. But I don't know how it's going to go for them. I mean, it could go fine. It could go okay. If we don't have a lot of wildling men going into northern castles and such and stealing women, in the night, like that
will be frowned upon.
Tradition. Yes. But then you wonder, how are the other northern houses going to handle them all of a sudden having these new neighbors? Are they going to live and let live? Are they going to attack them? Will there be general prejudice against them? There's already the northern mountain clans, which are kind of a significantly more civilized version of the wildling. Yeah. So,
it's a good point. You're going to have to control all this, because you're going to have to get a message to the northern lords to say, look, they've been invited, you've got to work with them,
Right, because what do they normally do? What do northern lords normally do when they see wildlings?
Right.
They attack and kill them. Yeah. So
they first tip their hat for climbing that wall, but then they kill them.
Right. Yes. Yeah. But Jon wonders, and it's a really good point, and it goes back to what we were talking about a minute ago, which side they'll back when Tormund Giantsbane attacks with the remnants of Mance's army. It's a dangerous situation. You'd have to hope bending the knee means something, maybe the added comfort and prospects south of the wall. But you got the likes of Rattleshirt around, which is problematic for success.
Well, but here's the thing. In this chapter, we learned that it took 1 in every 10,000 arrows fired to kill a member of the Night's Watch in the battle. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
When Tormund comes back with a reduced host and less arrows, the Night's Watch is going to be equally impervious to what they're doing. Okay?
Yeah.
What you could use these new free folk for is to wave down at them and say, hey, don't fight, just come through. Everything's fine. That's how I would use them.
Yes, that would be positive public relations, which I think is something you have you have a pretty good take on.
Well, while talking about our various holdings in Westeros, our PR firm needs to be re-engaged, I feel, because this decision by Stannis to make them, I mean, it's just so strange. These people banded together against all tradition and threw 10,000 arrows at the wall to try and get through it. They were willing to chance those ridiculous odds because of their terror of what was chasing them from the north.
Right. Yep.
You have two options. Leave them there to die and join the hosts of the undead, or let them through the wall. That's the only two choices available. And your PR masterclass is to take option number 2, but then do it whilst simultaneously burning to death their leader in front of them.
Yeah.
And then symbolically destroying their gods, and then last of all making them kneel. The one thing they loathe and despise about the people they're about to live amongst, they're forced to do as well.
Free folk. They're called free folk for a reason.
Right. So instead of getting 1,000 loyal adherents who could do that for you, who could say, hey, Tormund, relax, dude, come on through, everything's great. You're going to have 1,000 disgruntled, angry, unpleasant, unruly people who will hate you forever, basically. That's what you've done. Yeah,
it certainly makes a lot of sense what you're saying there.
And they'll turn on Stannis the first chance they get. If he hadn't made them kneel, they would have been loyal to it. By making them kneel, they will kill him the first chance they get.
That makes a lot of sense. You do wonder, you let them through to the southern side of the wall. They do need to know how to behave on the southern side of the wall. I agree.
That's what you should do. You should say, here's the rules. You have to agree to these rules. If you agree to these rules, come on through and eat your onion soup.
Right.
Right? You don't have to kneel, but you'd have to agree to these rules. That's not the same thing.
You don't have to give up your gods. You're allowed to have the old gods. Many in the north have the old gods. You don't have to accept her lore, but you have to abide by the rules south of the wall. So Bowen Marsh, he suggests to Jon, he said, I get we need to have a common cause with the wildlings, but can't we leave them on the north side to fight the enemy while we fill in the 3 gates with fresh ice? And Jon, he argues that without the gates, plural, that they're blind and that plus wildlings could climb. But I think he's missing the point, the primary argument that, I mean, aside from the callousness of leaving fellow humans to certain death, each death north of the wall swells the ranks of the others. So it's definitely a risk letting them through. I agree. It's definitely a risk. But it's one outweighed by the alternative, which is swelling the ranks more.
If you let them through, they might fight you. If you don't let them through, they will fight you.
Yes.
Twice.
They'll be undead while they're doing it, but they'll be fighting you.
They'll fight you until they die, then they'll fight you some more.
But I think Dollar's Ed had the same thoughts that you did. And he summed it up as only Ed could. He said that he was talking about I can't even remember how he started it, but then he said, I don't mean that the wildlings mean us any harm. I mean, we hacked apart their gods and made them burn them to pieces, but we gave them onion soup, and what's a god compared to a nice bowl of onion soup? And I think that's his way of saying, we've created a really unstable, dangerous situation here by stripping these people of all they hold dear and offending them. But hey, we gave them soup, so all's good, I think.
I will say, I'm actually with Bowen Marsh on sealing up the tunnels. Because Jon wants to keep them open so that he can send rangers through the wall. First of all, bad idea. always has been. Now there's nothing to see. There's nothing to see north of the wall. The wildlings have all come to the wall. There's no reason to go on a great ranging to find out what the wildlings are doing. We don't need that anymore. Stay this side of the wall. So
I agree.
Let's say you want to send out 1 or 2 people here and there. You've winched them up the wall, winch them back down the other side of the wall. Let them go over that way.
Right. Yeah, that's smart.
And then you don't need a tunnel. Yeah, they need a horse. All right, well, build a winch big enough for a horse then, you know?
Yeah, that's true. If they have the engineering capabilities to do that.
Yeah, I mean,
that
they
makes a lot of sense.
They built a sort of like an automated winch on the south side of the wall. Feels like it wouldn't be that difficult to rig something temporarily. I'm not talking about, some, big glass elevator or anything like that.
Right. It's going to play elevator music as they come and go. I was thinking along the same lines. Both Jon and Lord Commander Mormont before him often talked about being blind without rangers, and I kept thinking, what's to see?
Right.
Even if there's an army gathering out there, what are rangers going to do anyway? Spread your men out across the wall as best you can.
And watch.
And watch from there. Right, yeah.
You're the watchers on the wall.
Yes, that's right.
We're the watchers on the wall and the idiots north of the wall.
Right. Yeah, and Marsh agrees with us. He said that the rangings only lead to thinning the ranks, so...
Yeah,
anyway.
I don't agree with Marsh about his view that Jon is too close to Stannis. I mean, Jon is actually resisting more of Stannis's wishes than he could. He could succumb more than he is doing. I think the Lannisters could perceive it as a slight. Of course they will, but you also fight with whoever helps you. If the Lannisters turned up and said, we'll help you fight the wildlings and the others, Jon would be like, thank God, We've been asking for this for a long time.
Sure. Yeah.
It doesn't mean you've chosen sides by choosing.
There's not much. What's Jon going to do anyway? He can't do much to stop Stannis from doing what he pleases. And yeah, like you said, he's already rejected much of what Stannis wants. And, it's Jon's wall, so he could freeze the gates, whether Stannis wants him to or not. Jon has control of the wall. He's the Lord Commander. Now, as Jon also pointed out, they're outnumbered 3-1 by Stannis' men, so they could physically stop Jon from freezing the wall, I guess, if they wanted to. But it made me think, as far as Jon's concerned, in the Night's Watch in general, I guess I shouldn't just say Jon, but it made me think of Harrenhal. And with each new party that took over control of Harrenhal, the poor people inside Harrenhal were punished for supporting the previous regime that was there. And so I think, if Cersei survives and rules, nothing Jon does matters anyway. He's marked to death for death in her eyes.
Yeah.
But I think I could see that being an issue regardless.
Right. They're not going to blame the entire Night's Watch for Jon's decisions. Yes, Jon might be executed for having helped Stannis. He didn't really help Stannis. He's just not unhelping him.
But speaking of that, speaking of Cersei, word of Tywin's death has reached Castle Black. So did Lord Godric relent and let Davos send a raven?
Interesting.
I don't know. Jon's pretty confident in the news, so
yeah,
it doesn't seem like it's just random traveler gossip that
he did say that it came up the King's Road, though. Which made me think that it wasn't a raven.
Yeah.
Unless the raven was a walker. You just I don't like to fly.
He flew directly up the path of the King's Road.
I get lost otherwise.
Yeah, right. Well, Stannis knows, and doesn't seem to be getting ready to abandon them to sail for King's Landing. So that was one question we had last chapter.
Another question we had was what the effect of Janos Slynt's execution would be on Alistair Thorne, and what we speculated a few things, and one of them was that Alistair Thorne would become a little bit more circumspect with his insubordination towards Jon. That seems to be what's happening, but Jon recognizes that the underlying hatred remains quite strong.
Right. Yes, he still thinks that Thorne was more dangerous than Slynt.
Yeah.
Thorne was just not as dumb
Right.
as Slynt and get himself killed so obviously. But speaking of Slynt, his poisoned words against Jon are living on after him. The whole Turncloak warg rebel bastard thing, which is dangerous with Thorne out there fanning those flames, and someone as respected and high ranking as Bowen Marsh even bothering to repeat what's being talked about in in such terms.
Yeah. There's trouble in the ranks, that's for sure. One thing that Jon could do to sort of like secure his position as Lord Commander is to spend some time with the rank and file down in the dining room, but he actually denies himself that. After going down there to eat with his friends, he realizes that he shouldn't do, and he backs out. But actually, I think he's wrong here. I think it's better for he needs to not go and favor his friends. He needs to not go down there and eat with his buddies every night and form a little clique. That wouldn't be good. But going down into the dining room and eating with the common soldiers is the good thing. You should do that as a leader.
Yeah,
so I think he's mistaken with what he chose here.
I'm pretty sure Jon, possibly it was Robb, had talked about Ned inviting various household guard to dine with him for that exact purpose,
right?
To get to know these people. You don't, not to be their friends, because like Jon thinks of Ned's words when he decides not to eat with them, that sometime you might have to ask them or command them to do something that's really hard to command them to do, or you might have to sentence them in some way. But that doesn't mean you can't get to know them on a personal level.
Right. Maybe
not here like this. Maybe not, like you said, hanging out with your old best buds, cracking jokes about Melisandre and,
But there were other tables down there. He could have sat at another table with people he wasn't as familiar with and got to know them,
Yeah.
Jon's also very wistful, I feel, over Val. Several times in this chapter, he looks at Val and sort of lusts after her. I'll just say, Jon, you're an idiot. You had a chance. But I'll also say, it got me thinking, this is a rich vein of fan fiction here for alternative realities, where Jon said to Stannis, yeah, that sounds good, actually.
I bet there is. I bet ChatGPT could handle that task.
Yeah. What would have happened, ChatGPT, if Jon had said yes to Stannis?
Yeah, it's too bad that Jon can't make it be known what he gave up to stay in the Night's Watch. His father's name, Stark, Lord of Winterfell, Val as a wife. It might squash the whole Turncloak idea. Like, he was willing to give up all that to stay with us? Oh, wow.
Replace the rebel Turncloak with idiot.
Yeah.
I do worry for Val, right? Do you think she might be next for the fire?
Well, so that's what I was just about to say. Well, what's to become of her storyline? George Martin hasn't dropped her. She's still a somewhat focused on character in Jon chapters.
But of course, she wasn't Mance's woman. Dalla was Mance's woman. So Dalla would be the one they'd want to burn. Val was Dalla's sister.
Right.
So that would kind of make her a princess by sort of south of the wall thinking.
Yeah, I guess so. I think that is what Stannis is thinking. She's a pseudo princess.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, what are the wildlings currently thinking of her? They see her standing next to Stannis and Melisandre, crowned with a little circlet of bronze on her head.
I get the feeling Val's face speaks volumes for how she feels about her situation. Right. I'm just guessing.
She's not rubbing Stannis' arm or
exactly.
anything. She's stoically standing there with nothing but a scowl on her face. They say they don't recognize royalties simply because someone says that they are or inherit it north of the wall. So there could be jealousy, feeling that she sold out, exploiting this relationship with the king beyond the wall, using her beauty to reach elevated status. Or maybe they feel she's a captive. Maybe they get it. She has no choice, you know?
I will say, I think she might be safe from the fire, because if she wasn't safe from the fire, then Stannis wouldn't be offering her as the new Lady of Winterfell, you know?
Right.
Maybe he's holding her for something else in that, you know, because she is beautiful and she has a claim to royalness. She might be a bride for somebody that he wants to secure to his cause.
Very well might be, yeah. Speaking of all that, there's 2 examples in this chapter of a son following a father into leadership. And when I say speaking of all that, speaking of they don't recognize a leader being the son of the previous leader, but Sigorn follows Styr as Magnar of Then, and then it's meant, you know, Jon is watching all the leaders go by first and throwing in the weirwood branch and kneeling. And some of the people that he's mentioning, one is a 12-year-old son of Alfin Crowkiller. Now, possibly both clans just backed these 2, but the 12-year-old must have been something special to earn leadership status at that age.
I wonder if that belongs in pedantry, actually, because that does sort of like tend to undermine that feeling of there's no hereditary north of the wall, because clearly there is.
Yeah. That was my thought when I read it is, wait, how's that 12-year-old a leader?
Yeah.
That's not how it's supposed to work north of the wall.
All right, excellent. It's time for some spoilers. If you join at the upper tiers of the Buy Me a Coffee Sustainer levels, you can get in on the spoilers, and they're always fascinating.
So,
well, thank you.
There you go.
Those are excellent spoilers tonight. I mean, those are really excellent spoilers tonight. Everyone should get the upper tiers of the Buy Me a Coffee Sustainer just to know what I now know. It's extraordinary. I feel like I need to start the whole recording over again.
Your face, there was quite a long moment of silence while your face was just
and that's
your
not
jaw
me,
was hanging open. That's not, no.
All right, we'll give you some background.
All right. Well, Melisandre calls the Horn of Joramun the Horn of Darkness, because if the wall falls, it begins the long night that never ends. Now, we're all familiar with Azor Ahai and Lightbringer, and Melisandre fully believes that Stannis is Azor Ahai, and he seems to be wielding a sword that, at least on the surface, is definitely bringing light. However, there are other tales of a similar hero as Azor Ahai around the rest of the known world. The hero goes by different names depending on where the story is retold. Some of them include Hirkun the Hero, Yintar, Neferion, and Eldrick Shadowchaser. Now, the Rhoynar tell of a time very similar to the Long Night. There was a darkness that caused the waters of their mother Rhoyne to freeze as far south as Selhoru, which is not all that far north of Volantis. It's pretty far south in Essos. In their story, a hero united the various bands of the Rhoyne together, and rather than wielding Lightbringer, the children of the Rhoyne chose song as their mighty weapon. It's said that they all joined voices in singing a secret song that brought back the daylight. And further east in Essos, the Yeti believed their own version of events where a woman with a monkey's tail averted the disaster after the sun hit its face for a lifetime.
They do seem related.
Yes, they all have some similar notes there. Not singing notes necessarily. That's specific to the Rhoynar.
In comparison with the television show, Mance burns at Castle Black on the south side of the wall in the TV show too. There's a couple of differences. Stannis gives him one last chance to kneel. So he isn't burning him as an oath breaker. He's burning him for not kneeling.
Big difference. Big difference. Because that takes Stannis's rigidity out of the picture. He's willing to forgive him. Exactly.
It's just a one line, but it does change that.
Yeah.
Melisandre's words are verbatim. She says the exact same words in the TV show as she says in the book. But Mance getting killed before the fire can really take him is Jon himself, seemingly on the spur of the moment, because he's in formation watching, and then he turns away in disgust and then fires an arrow from further away. And interestingly, just sort of time-wise, this is before he becomes Lord Commander. The timeline
wow.
has changed.
Yeah.
So he does this before. It in the TV show, it earns him an annoyed look from Stannis. There doesn't appear to be any sense that blood magic is being implied by the burning of Mance.
Okay.
Because again,
Yeah.
Stannis, if they were planning blood magic, would Stannis give him a chance to kneel and get out of it? You know.
Right. Yeah. That doesn't make sense.
So the sequence is interesting because it's before his elevation to Lord Commander. It's before Lyanna's sassy letter. It's before the offer of legitimization. It's before Gilly, Sam, and Aemon leave. And Shireen and Selyse are there watching as well. The former, Shireen, with her eyes closed. The latter, with the madness of zealotry in her eyes.
I can see that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That does track.
Yeah. Pedantry corner. How does the blood magic work? Mance didn't die. I've asked this. Mance didn't die in the flames, so does it count? Was she even doing blood magic or just killing him for his crimes?
Yeah, we don't know, Jon. If it's being done for blood magic, Jon's not privy to it yet. Anyway.
Yeah. So that's not pedantry. That's just a question, really. But this one is pedantry. Winter is coming. Winter's upon us, basically. Okay.
Right.
This is quite far north. This is the north side of the wall, which we've discussed never sees the sun.
I know where you're going.
The north side of the wall was weeping. It was above freezing in the shadow of that wall.
Must have been a really warm day, I guess.
It must have been an extraordinarily warm day. Or a really big fire. But
there is fire.
No, it was
700 feet up.
It was weeping before the fire started. It was like
it was. Yes, it was. Yeah.
So that just didn't really sit.
Yeah.
No, the thing is, if it could weep now, it would melt in the summer. They've had a 10-year summer.
Yeah. Now that it's winter, it's still weeping. Yeah. I see what you mean. And of course, the whole 12-year-old being the leader of one of the clans.
That is very good. I really like that. I wish you'd saved that for pedantry. I'm going to cut this up and put this in pedantry because that was a good point. I guess each clan could have its own rules, and that would mean that there wouldn't be a sort of general feeling of it. So you can get away from it, I suppose.
2 of the clans chose the sons of their previous leaders.
But one of them, it could be valid. The Magnar of Thens could be like completely valid, but the 12-year-old, clearly that doesn't make much sense other than by hereditary.
Right.
All right, news and notes.
Well, so our speculation from last episode regarding the filming beginning on House of the Dragon Season 3 on March 31st, well, we proved to be spot on with our careful deduction of the words that were provided to us. Showrunner Ryan Condal said that Season 3 is the biggest season to date, both in actual size of the production and also in the show's ambition, adding that the war heats up very quickly this season, and that the people waiting for horrible, brutal, pitiless bloodshed are, well, they're in for quite a treat. Condal also spoke about his relationship with George Martin and Martin's deleted blog posts expressing his displeasure about some of the show's decisions. According to Condal, he and George Martin had a great working relationship for years, calling Martin a personal hero of his. Condal says he made every effort to include George Martin in the adaptation process, and for a long time they had a very strong relationship. However, somewhere along the way, Condal said that Martin became unwilling to reasonably acknowledge the practical issues the show faced. Of course, now this is me speaking, not Condal. Many will argue that some of the issues were simply character lines and decisions that wouldn't have been constrained by budgets and such things, such as...
but that's the nature of adaptation, right? Adaptation is you've got to adapt it to the format that you're developing it for. And so there would have to be compromises because of budgets and,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's just some, we don't want to give away show spoilers now, but there's an event called Blood and Cheese in Season 2, and some of the details and some of the dialogue are changed, and a lot of people felt that it weakened the scene.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
And one more plug for giving us a 5-star rating and a positive review on whatever platform you listen to us on. We'll always read them out on the show, so get your name in lights.
That's right. Yeah, there's a space right here.
Right
here, right
this
where we are
space
right
left
now.
Blank.
Yes, exactly.
Let's conclude this one. Jon continues to kill the boy. He's sort of like... maybe he thinks the boy might come back to life when the White Walkers get here. Maybe that's...
Right.
He's set it on fire now.
Gotta burn the boy. Yeah. And one thing we didn't mention is that, well, I think it was actually mentioned in the summary, but we didn't discuss it, is at the very end of the chapter, in the last few sentences, he decides to send away some of his oldest friends to a Holder and Toad to the Shadow Tower and Pip and Gren to Eastwatch. Maybe that's to relieve temptation of wanting to hang out with them.
Yeah. But that does leave him very lonely, and surrounded by people who don't particularly like him, it seems.
True, yes. He's down to a raven and a wolf,
right,
and Alistair Thorne.
Right.
That's a problem.
And Stannis continues to kill Joy and potential allies left and right.
Yes, he does. And Marsh has a line where he says, "The more that the men get to know him, the less they like him," which is, the opposite of his brother.
Yeah. And Stannis has a line where he says something along the lines of, "I want their swords, not their love," or that I want their loyalty, not their love. And it's like,
that feels flawed.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need their love. You're right. You don't need their love, but you earn their loyalty by being someone that they want to be loyal to,
Yes, you just let thousands of wildlings south of the wall. You better need at least their appreciation,
right,
and their
exactly.
acceptance of you. So,
Lightbringer is shining brighter than ever, but still no heat from it, so it's not fulfilling all of the requirements of Lightbringer of yore.
And Maester Aemon was suggesting that maybe that Stannis is not the man that Melisandre claims that he is, Azor Ahai reborn, if he feels that Daenerys is the actual person that is the prince or princess who was promised.
But before he knew of Daenerys' existence or continued existence, he already had suspicions about Stannis, right? I mean, because he learned of
the sword. Yeah,
he learned of Daenerys and the dragons after he left the wall.
Yes, when he first saw the sword, he thought, that's not giving off any heat.
Exactly.
That's odd.
And when you say Maester Aemon foresaw the sword, exactly what do you mean?
Oh, I missed it. But the free folk, they finally get across to the southern side of the wall.
Or at least this 900 of them. It feels like... Yeah. I mean, at one point they had 100,000, right?
Yeah. And Bowen Marsh mentioned letting tens of thousands south of the wall. So it's unclear just how many crossed through the wall at this sitting here. So they're here at the cost of their gods and their knees, but they did make it, which is what Mance wanted. He was willing to trade the Horn of Joramun to let these people through, and they got through. So, success at that level, I guess.
Yeah. And Jon seems determined to continue the folly of ranging at the risk of the tunnels being breached.
Yeah.
Which it's the one weak point of the wall, and you could make it invulnerable if you just give up this desire to see more than 5 miles north of the wall.
Yeah, how far do you really need to see anyway?
Right.
Yeah. And is Jon possibly regretting his decision regarding Val and Winterfell and being a Stark?
I mean,
at least Val.
That drafty room with the Raven and Ghost would be a lot less drafty if Val was in there with you.
Well, that's true. Yeah, that is true.
All right, next week we check in with the Breaker of Chains herself, Daenerys Targaryen, the true Azor Ahai reborn.
Yes, well, that'll be fun.
In the meantime, there's 3 ways that you can help us. You could leave us a 5-star rating and a positive review. You could buy us a cup of Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostharrenhal. There's a tier to match your budget and interest, and the upper tiers get you the spoiler section, which is really amazing, especially today. Or you can make a donation directly to our cause at our website, ghostsofharrenhal.buzzsprout.com.
And hey, if you're looking for more ways to interact with us, well, one thing you could do is you could send us a text. The link is at the top of every episode show notes. And I will always make a plug that you should join us on our Discord community. We have a lot of fun and a lot of interesting discussions there. And if you're interested in keeping up on the latest Ghosts of Harrenhal news and developments, well, check us out on our social media. You can follow us on Twitter at Ghosts Harrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram. Like I said, come hang out with us on Discord and YouTube.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.